And we are live. We
Live,
are
live,
live. Okay. Um, Genesis 31. We are here. We made it. We made it to Genesis 31. I
for
love it.
show.
1 through 29, and then 30, and then 31.
Whoa, this boy can count.
I mean, we did it. No, we have a very awesome chapter in store for us. I really enjoyed reading this, and let's all read it together. So, Justin, why don't you get us kicked off?
Let's do it. Genesis 31, verse 1. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what belonged to our father, he has made all this wealth. And Jacob saw the attitude of Laban, and behold, it was not friendly toward him, as it had been before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, Return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent word and called Rachel and Leah to his flock in the field, and said to them, I see your father's attitude, that it is not friendly toward me as it was before. But the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. However, God did not allow him to do me harm. If he said this, the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flock delivered speckled. And if he said this, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock delivered striped. So God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. And it came about at the time when the flock was breeding that I raised my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the male goats that were mating were striped, speckled, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. And I said, Here I am. He said, Now raise your eyes and see that all the male goats that I am mating are striped, speckled, and mottled, for I have seen everything that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a memorial stone, where you made a vow to me. Now arise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth. Rachel and Leah said to him, Do we still have any share or inheritance in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us and has also entirely consumed our purchase price. Surely all the wealth which God has taken away from our father belongs to us and our children. Now then, do whatever God has told you. Henry,
Yes.
what are your thoughts on the first 16 verses?
There's a lot going on here, as I like to say. I would like to first kind of go back to the previous chapter for a second. Jacob has just finished working 14 years to pay the dowry for his wives, Leah and Rachel. And he paid this dowry to Laban. And at this point, Laban and Jacob come to an agreement. Laban wants Jacob to continue working with him because Laban has prospered greatly with Jacob leading and growing his flock. And so they come to some type of agreement where Jacob says, if I can keep all the spotted animals and you're going to keep all the pure, not spotted animals. And ultimately, Laban agrees to this. And Laban's a businessman. So Laban thinks this is a win for him. He likes this idea. Laban has a reputation at this point for doing things that are to his benefit during his negotiations. And so, but Jacob, he has some deception in play. He has a plan in place ultimately to make this agreement benefit him. And he must know that if this benefits him, that it's really at the detriment of Laban. And
And,
so
and after this negotiation, though, he stays 6 more years.
he does. So he's staying. I mean, he's working.
So at this point in the text, he's been here 20 years.
He's been here 20 years, and we're about to basically this chapter introduces what happens whenever you treat people within your family and your boss in this type of way. How do people feel whenever you do that? So that's what this chapter starts off right out the gate. We see exactly how they feel. Starting in verse 1, now Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons saying, this is Laban's son speaking, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what belonged to our father, he has made all this wealth. They don't feel like this was a win-win agreement. They feel like this was a win-lose agreement. And then in the next verse, Laban, it's clear that his attitude has changed, and there was no longer a friendly demeanor between the two. So that's what we get hit right out the gate here. And then we actually learn later in the chapter that Jacob believes and feels that Laban has ultimately changed his wages 10 times. We see that in verse 7. Now, it seems that God affirms this later on in the chapter, so it seems to be accurate. And we don't know exactly what that means exactly in terms of changing his wages. I mean, it's kind of alluded to a little bit here. But nonetheless, this is not a friendly business deal that's going on here. These are two people that seem to be in competition in growing this flock of animals, when in fact they could have been more like cordial business partners. They seem to be trying to kind of one up each other. They say in business deals, business partners, it's just like a marriage. It's really easy to get into, really hard to get out of. And as we know in the Bible, divorce is totally not cool. Okay, we know that for certain. Okay, we know it's totally not cool. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't get a divorce. And so, yeah. Verse 3, though, we see something very interesting as well. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So God is communicating directly to Jacob and saying, hey, return to your land. He's giving him a command hey, you've done this, you've been here for a long time, it's time for you to ultimately to move on. And I think this ultimately goes back and references the dream that Jacob has. So we ultimately know that in verse 3 here, that is in reference to, the plan was always, for Jacob to leave and go back to this land in which God had promised Abraham, Isaac, and he also extended that promise ultimately to Jacob as well. And that promise was extended and brought up again in Genesis 28, verse 15. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So this was the plan all along from the very beginning.
Good call. So yeah, as we see, Jacob had wanted to leave for Canaan, had wanted to return home, and now was as good a time as any, because now Laban and his sons were developing like some animosity and violent attitudes toward him. And so I think Laban's sons seem to be jealous because of Jacob's success, and also it's decreasing their inheritance.
Right.
So the angel of God here, that is God. And so God directed Jacob to go ahead and return home. And so Jacob goes and he convinces his wives, right? He meets them and tells them why they should secretly flee. And so in his discussion with them, he gives credit to God for pretty much, he's like, hey, like God gave me your father's herd. And so both Rachel and Leah, feel the same way, that they reasoned that it was a good idea for all of them to flee.
Agreed. And it's not just Jacob who feels upset with Laban. It is also Laban's own daughters, Rachel and Leah. I mean, they're also very, very upset with Laban as well. So it's pretty clear that Laban has been acting very shrewdly in all of his dealings with everyone, and nobody on this side of the family is particularly excited about it. I would also say that you see an outward expression of Jacob giving credit to God multiple times in verse 5 and verse 7. So Jacob is ultimately giving credit to God for everything that really has happened up until this point. And then you also see Jacob expressing that credit to his family and his wives, and kind of showing this clear leadership and a faithful way to God. Really, that's our first time seeing this, out of Jacob. So I think it's really powerful. I think a lot of people could, lead their families in a similar way, and yeah, so I think that's really exciting. Anytime you see a leader in a family, you know, giving credit to God and putting God at the center of their life, I think you see a lot of changes within that family, whether that be the husband or anybody for that matter. One person in a family can change the entire family by them ultimately putting God first. So ideally, the father takes the helm on this. However, whether you're a father, a son, whoever, you putting God first in your life, I think, can definitely have a tremendous influence on your family. And I think we see the Leah and Rachel falling right under that leadership of Jacob and agreeing with him and being right on board. So, yeah. Verse 17, then Jacob stood up and put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove away all his livestock and all his property which he had acquired. The livestock he possessed, which he had acquired in Paddan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his flock, and Rachel stole the household idols that were her father's. And Jacob deceived Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him that he was fleeing. So he fled with all that he had, and he got up and crossed the Euphrates River and set out for the hill country of Gilead.
So here we see, first off, Rachel steals her father's idol. And this connects right back to exactly what you were saying before we started these verses, Henry, is there seems to be a religious background here, and that her father's influence on the daughters shows that maybe Rachel has some attachment to this false god. And so she doesn't want to part with that, but instead wants to bring that with her. And so we're going to talk more about that idol and all that little bit later in the verses. It's going to come up again, and I want to unpack it a little more. But here, though, Jacob's escape would not have been a simple thing. I mean, he's sneaking away with his wives, his children, his servants, and his livestock. So this isn't like you just pack your wife and two kids up in a car, in a suitcase, and then you're gone in the middle of the night. This is a hard getaway.
Absolutely. And with regards to this escape, this is somewhat reminiscent of something we'll learn about in the future with the Israelites' escape from Egypt. There seems to be some similarities here that we'll continue to read about as we get further into at the end of Genesis, beginning of Exodus. One excerpt from Dr. Constable's notes about these idols I would like to read. These gods were usually small figurines, 2 to 3 inches long, sometimes carried on the body as charms, many of which archaeologists have discovered. They may have represented departed ancestors or gods that their makers venerated. Rachel may also have hoped that these gods would make her a fruitful mother. Apparently, Laban's family worshipped false gods as well as the true God. So we definitely have some idolatry going on here within this family. And so Jacob's leaving. He's chunking up the deuces and he's not telling anybody. This is not typically how you leave a family, okay? Especially, it's one thing to go like on a weekend trip or whatever, but when you're leaving forever, typically you say goodbye. He's not doing that. He's not giving Laban all of her brothers and sisters and family that type of courtesy. They're chunking up the deuces. Verse 22, Justin.
Verse 22. When Laban was informed on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsmen with him and pursued him a distance of 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. However, God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream of the night and said to him, "Be careful that you do not speak to Jacob either good or bad." And Laban caught up with Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen camped in the hill country of Gilead. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done by deceiving me and carrying away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and deceive me, and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with joy and with songs, with tambourine and with lyre, and did not allow me to kiss my grandchildren and my daughters? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful not to speak either good or bad to Jacob.' Now you have indeed gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" Then Jacob replied to Laban, "Because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. The one with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, point out what is yours among my belongings, and take it for yourself." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them.
So starting off in verse 22, we see Jacob has just left and Laban is now pursuing Jacob. Laban doesn't find out that Jacob's left, it looks like, until 3 days in. And so, yeah, we have a pursuit here. This is definitely interesting. This doesn't sound like a friendly pursuit to me. And then we have God coming in here in verse 24. However, God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream of the night and said to him, "Be careful that you do not speak to Jacob either good or bad." There's a command here that specifically says, "Be careful that you do not speak to Jacob either good or bad." Okay, that's interesting. What did we just read in the following verses, Justin?
That Laban caught up to him and talked to him.
That's right. So Laban specifically disobeys this command by God. Totally not cool. And of course, Laban's angry. He's angry for two reasons. One, Jacob didn't say goodbye as he was leaving. Now, you might understand that, right? That makes a little bit of sense. Your daughters are leaving, all your grandchildren are leaving. Presumably, you could never see these people ever again, right? This isn't a weekend trip. This is a many, many, many days journey, and you don't say goodbye. Not only that, you're leaving with, I mean, at this point, to me, it sounds like this flock has gotten large. And it sounds to me like the majority of this flock was Jacob's at this point. And so the flock got a lot tinier whenever he left. And so that's the first reason why he's angry. I don't think Jacob had to do it this way. Okay, Jacob had the promise from God that he was going to do this, bring Jacob back to this land. and give his descendants the east, north, south, and west parts of this land. Okay, give them this area. Why did he do this? Why did he leave in this abrupt way? Now, the Bible doesn't tell us that God told him to leave super abruptly, don't tell anybody, all these other things. The Bible doesn't say that. I don't think, I mean, this is conjecture, I guess, but I don't think Jacob necessarily had to do it this way. I think he could have gone to Laban and said goodbye. It might have been more challenging or whatever, but ultimately God's promise is going to take place regardless. So why not leave amicably? The promise, as I mentioned in Genesis 28:15. And then the second reason why Laban's mad is because he believes Jacob stole these idols. And yeah, I think there's a right way to do something and a wrong way to do something. If you have God's promise one way or another, I think Jacob could have done this a little bit differently, as the way I see it. Justin.
Yeah, so we see here God's sovereign protection in that God did visit Laban in a dream, warning him. And as to that warning, I was unsure about what this means. So do not speak to Jacob, either good or bad. One of the things I read suggests that it could mean that Laban was not allowed to try and bring Jacob back so that he could. It meant that God was allowing Laban to go ahead and talk to Jacob, but that he couldn't do anything to try to persuade him or interfere with him returning to his homeland, is one of the things that I read. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two slave women, but he did not find them. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols and put them in the camel's saddlebag, and she sat on them. So Laban searched through all the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, may my Lord not be angry that I cannot stand in your presence, because the way of the woman is upon me. So he searched, but did not find the household idols. So here, though, this is where more talk of the idol comes out. And so Laban could have been upset that just having property stolen, but like Henry talked about before, there's other significance to this. And so the idol might have served the purpose for the owner, Laban, that for maybe receiving protection, possibly prosperity, maybe even fertility. In the ancient world, a lot of people felt like though their idols provided those things for them. So this idol was obviously very important to him because he did a thorough search of Jacob's stuff. And so obviously at this point where Jacob's like, hey, whoever has the idol, may that person be killed. He doesn't know, right? He doesn't know that Rachel's the one who stole it. And so he's like unknowingly giving her the death penalty if she gets caught.
Right. Absolutely.
So here, it appears that her father, Laban, didn't even suspect that Rachel was the thief, but he suspected Jacob. So one of the things here I see is that Rachel joins in on the deception behavior, and she actually ends up deceiving the ultimate deceiver, her father.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't. He doesn't seem to suspect her. Yeah, that's what maybe he thought that she loved her or she loved him, right? Or that she would never do this type of deal. Maybe he knew of no great offense that he did to her, and he was completely unaware of that there was strife between them. And ultimately, I
Yeah.
guess he probably loved her, and you know, who knows what? I mean, parents can kind of have a sixth sense when something's going on. Maybe he just straight up gave her a pass. Maybe he smelled, maybe he thought something was like up. You know what I mean? It's like, huh, this seems a bit unusual. You know, who knows? That's what I personally. I think parents are smarter than we like to give them credit for. I mean, I could definitely tell you there's been multiple times where I thought I was getting away with something, and I think my parents let me get away with it, but they knew something wasn't right. And Laban's a shrewd businessman, Justin.
Oh, he's got street smarts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's got street
Yeah.
smarts.
Yeah.
Okay, verse 36. Then Jacob became angry and argued with Laban, and Jacob said to Laban, "What is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? Though you have searched through all my property, what have you found of all your household property? Set it here in front of my relatives and your relatives so that they may decide between the two of us. For these 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten the rams of your flocks. I did not even bring to you that which was torn by wild animals. I took the loss myself. You demanded it of my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. This is how I was. By day the heat consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. For these 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your two daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been for me, surely now you would have sent me away empty handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, so he rendered judgment last night.
So here we go. In this section, when I was reading this, it reminds me of a movie scene. So Laban is all catching up and he's accusing Jacob. It's one of those things where like, I'm out of order, you're out of order. And it's one of those things where Laban's like, you did all this stuff. And then Jacob's like, no, no, you did everything wrong, you know? And so um, it's kind of switching here. So now Jacob is accusing Laban of all his wrongdoing, right? So I'm sure that he's wanted to. This is one of those. This is 20 years in the making, baby.
Right.
Right?
There's a
This
lot
is
of
finally
pent up
that.
anger.
Yeah, is finally you get to. Yeah, just rip up everything your father-in-law has done, right? So now Jacob recounted the 20 years of hardships with financial struggles caused by Laban. Jacob explained how if God had not supernaturally intervened, Jacob would have been just left penniless, right? By the selfish and deceptive actions of Laban.
Totally. And, I think this type of behavior, um, should this, I look at Jacob here and listen, while well, if anyone deserves to be angry, Jacob definitely deserves to kind of let this go. But I think we as Christians should be expecting people to wrong us, whether they be Christians or non-Christians for that matter. We live in this fallen, broken world, and I think we should be expecting this to happen from time to time. And responding in anger is not always the best approach. I'm not trying to come down on Jacob here for being angry, but he definitely um, I just see us when people do us wrong in our lives, which is going to happen. I don't think anger is the correct response that we should ultimately have. I think we should respond in another way. I'm sure there's some verses that will ultimately back this up. And Justin, I thought that you would be the perfect person to tell us which verses that that is.
When we're talking about this, I'm reminded of Sermon of the Mount. So I believe that's Matthew chapters 5 through 7. Um, so that's what I think of most in reference to what you're talking about love those who hate you, bless those who persecute you. Like this whole idea, I feel like of what you're saying fits with Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah, Matthew chapter 5, verse 39. But I say to you, do not show opposition against an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other toward him also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak also. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. It's just this whole idea that, I think we should be prepared for this type of thing to happen to us ultimately, for us to get taken advantage of in one way or another, and for us to act gracefully in accordance with how God would want us to react. Also, verse 39 here, just one interesting thing to point out. I did not even bring to you that which was torn by wild animals. I took the loss myself. You demanded it of my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Another reference to Dr. Constable. Under traditional ancient Near Eastern law, a shepherd was not held responsible for losses to his master's flocks due to attacking wild beasts, and in some cases thieves. Yet Jacob had borne these losses. Laban had cheated Jacob. So it seemed that, according to the culture of the time, Laban was demanding of Jacob that which was not customary.
Yep, Laban was sketch.
Shrewd businessman. Shrewd businessman. Okay, verse 43.
Then Laban replied to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my grandchildren, the flocks are my flocks, and everything that you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these daughters of mine or to their children to whom they have given birth? So now, come, let's make a covenant, you and I, and it shall be a witness between you and me. Then Jacob took a stone and set it up as a memorial stone. Jacob said to his relatives, gather stones. So they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Now Laban called it Jegar Sahudath, but Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore it was named Gilead and Mizpah. For he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me, and when we are absent one from the other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives besides my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Laban also said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold the memorial stone, which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the memorial stone is a witness, that I will not pass by this heap to you for harm, and you will not pass by this heap, and this memorial stone to me for harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his relatives to the meal, and they ate the meal and spent the night on the mountain. Then early in the morning, Laban got up and kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place.
So at this point, I think Laban has ultimately heard Jacob. Laban is very aware that God is with Jacob. And at this point, Laban's just trying to, I think, extract as much as he can before he bounces out. This is his last shrewd business deal. And it's not like a terribly bad deal, but it just seems like Laban just asking, keeps on asking, keeps on wanting. And so this deal ultimately includes two things. One, in verse 50, if you mistreat my daughters, or if you take wives beside my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. So that's the first requirement of the covenant. Essentially, hey, don't mistreat my daughters and don't marry anyone else. That's fine enough. And then the second one is in verse 52. This heap is a witness, and the memorial stone is a witness, that I will not pass by this heap to you for harm, and you will not pass by this heap and this memorial stone to me for harm. And so here, Laban's basically saying, hey, here's the line. We're drawing a line right here. I'm not going to cross over here and hurt you. You're not going to cross over here and hurt me. And at this point, I think Jacob is super successful. I think Laban has more to benefit in this. I don't think Jacob is so much worried, right? Jacob has a promise from God. Laban doesn't have a promise of anything, you know. So and then finally in verse 53, something that seems interesting to me as well. This is Laban speaking. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Ultimately, Laban seems to have two deities in mind when he said the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor. Whereas Jacob swore by the awesome one of Isaac, which indicates that he was worshiping the God of his fathers. Laban, on the other hand, swore by the pagan god of his. Laban, on the other hand, swore by the pagan god his fathers worshipped. So here we see that, you know, there's two different camps here. There's someone who is making this covenant with a combination of to the one true God of the Bible and these other gods, and ultimately Jacob is staying faithful to the one true God.
Yeah, so as we see in this discourse, despite Laban's accusations and all that he said, he left with nothing because it was obvious that Laban was the one at fault, not Jacob. So after piling the stones, Laban gave the monument an Aramaic name, but Jacob gave it a Hebrew name.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, and Laban kind of used in forming this agreement or covenant. Laban used verbiage, making it sound like Jacob was a bad guy and that Laban needed to be protected from him. But that was not what had happened here, just in their history together. And also, I wasn't sure about that verse that you were talking about. I thought it was interesting where Laban said the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor. Um, Obviously, that's tricky. It could be like what you were talking about, how Laban was referencing two different deities, or I also read somewhere it's possible that Laban, since he didn't have a correct, he obviously does not have a correct understanding of the one true God. And so he could have thought it was the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor because Nahor was a relative of Abraham. And so I'm not sure. I mean, I think it could go either way in that verse. I'm not sure. But either way, Laban doesn't know what's going on, and he is trying to use this opportunity, this covenant, to benefit him because, like you said, Henry, Jacob doesn't need it. He has God's protection.
Totally. And finally, in verse 54, I think Jacob does something pretty cool here. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain. And it seems that Jacob at this point, um, he at this point, you know, there's no contingency or anything to, you know, the one true God being his one true God, which could have been the case earlier when he initially had that dream when he was sleeping on those pile of rocks. You know, that he had this contingency. Now it seems that Jacob has put his full weight and trust into God, and that he is now being more faithful and also being more public in his faithfulness and his declaration of his thankfulness. So this has been a wild ride. Okay, this has been a very wild ride. I think the two applications that I just see some challenges in a family, and it's some challenges in business partners. That's what I'm seeing here. A lot of challenges, and I think there's a lot to learn with ultimately. First, for one, who we choose to be business partners with. I think that's something to be very cautious of. Um, And I guess you could extend that really out to who you spend your time with in general, because they can either bring you great consternation, or they can bring you great joy. And ideally, I think we all want the great joy. And Laban just wasn't one of those guys. He was a joy sapper. And this isn't just my opinion. Jacob believes so, and it seems that his daughters were also on board with this as well.
I know I like to avoid consternation.
uh,
Yeah, and in reference to the application that I saw in this chapter, we saw earlier in Jacob's life that he participated in deception and lying and all those things. But in this chapter, I see kind of when he was accused of this, he was actually the innocent one, the good guy, and Laban was doing all those things. So the application for our lives, I believe, is that we need to decide to live righteous lives so that when someone does accuse us, that we will be found innocent or blameless. I know for me, there's been times in my life when I'll have hidden sins in just one accusation, whether the accusation was correct or not, but that following that led to the discovery of my hidden sins and all that I had to be ashamed of. And so, even if you're not guilty of the original sin that were you being accused of, an investigation, can find all that out. So, but there have also been other times in my life when by the help of God, I've been able to live consistently, by avoiding sin and things like that. And so accusations uncovered that I was just genuinely trying to live faithful to God in my life. And so, as we've seen just in court cases and other similar situations, that people will grab onto whatever they can to attack your character in order to prove the violation that they originally accused you of. So, are there things in your life that could give your accusers ammunition or cause you shame? And so, it's an important question to address to make sure that I'm living faithfully to God, and then also I avoid hurting my testimony in order to serve God, but also just, cause any blemish on the church as a whole.
Agreed. There is nothing that I've ever done that I knew that it was wrong that I'm glad that I did. Okay. Nothing. I regret every single one of those moments. I don't care what that ultimately resulted in. I literally don't care. Regrets, regrets, regrets. Every single thing that I've ever done that was not in accordance with the Bible, totally regret. Wish I hadn't have done it, and wish that I could take it back. If at all possible, if I go back, I would completely change it. I don't care where it brought me here. One of the things that we keep seeing, right, is that Jacob really comes out of the situation a winner. But did he have to do all this way? Is the question that I keep coming back to. Did he have to do it all this way? I personally don't think so. I think he could have made different steps along the way, starting with his brother Esau from the very beginning all the way to the very end. He could have handled the situation differently, and who knows what the result would have been otherwise. Maybe Jacob would have been way more blessed. Maybe there would have been a lot more joy and happiness. Maybe Jacob could have had a better influence on Laban and that entire family. Who knows what ultimately the result could have been. So, yeah, I would just be very aware of the things that you do and know for a fact that there's not a single thing that you ever do that's bad that you're going to be like, you know what, I'm really glad that I did that. I think long term, you might think that now, but I think as the years pass, you're going to slowly realize like, hey, that was a bad idea. I wish I hadn't done that. Regrets. And I try to live my life in accordance with minimal regrets. So cool. Justin, killer chapter 31. I feel like we got we got to see some resolution here.
Yeah.
There's been some buildup for a little
Yeah.
while. Jacob went on this awesome journey, this epic journey, and now he's back to where God ultimately promised he would bring him.
Yep.
Really excited to see what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what's in store for Jacob's life next? Who knows what's in store for our lives next? Who knows? Exciting every single day. Extremely exciting. super stoked for what's going on in y'all's lives next. If y'all something super exciting in y'all's lives, throw that in the comments. I want to read all about that, whatever's next. So, all right. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful day. Look forward to seeing you in Genesis chapter 32. Peace
See
out,
yous.
everybody.